I just finished reading the final issue of Aliens versus Avengers, and even in its final issue, it still manages to bring some really exciting surprises. Beware spoilers ahead for this issue and the series so far. So in issue 3, Tony and the few survivors of Earth escape to Mars seeking the help of the X-Men, only to discover it had become a graveyard when Sinister chose sides and decided to join Team Xenomorph. Tony, Spider-Man, and Carol were quickly overwhelmed by the planet full of xenomorphs and were separated. Carol nearly fell to the Xenos but was rescued in the nick of time by the last surviving X-Men, Wolverine, Armor, Emma Frost, and Manifold. After that, they soon found Tony's body and have no idea if Miles is still alive or if he's been killed by the Xenos or worse. But before they can mourn Tony, the Wakandan interstellar fleet arrives. Issue 4 begins with the birth of an entirely new xenomorph, birthed from Mr. Sinister. This thing grows at an accelerated rate, it's crimson and it's massive, easily towering over the rest of the xenomorphs. The other Sinisters each have their own special xeno growing in them, but the Sinister Xeno decides there can be only one and takes out the rest of those Sinisters. We also learn the fate of the Wakandan Galactic Empire. They had become so powerful, they were a Type 2 civilization harnessing the power of stars, and yet when the androids unleashed their coordinated xenomorph strikes, even the mighty Wakandans fell. Out of the 57 Wakandan worlds and countless space outposts, only 2 worlds remained, and they were actually on the verge of collapse against the Xenos. When the engineers arrived to the last Wakandan strongholds, ready to wipe them from existence, King T'Challa was ready, and he actually put them down and I guess took them in to study their remains. I think there still might be androids out there in the universe furthering the xenomorph takeover, but this part is kind of left a bit ambiguous. We cut back to the present as King T'Challa says goodbye to his old friend Tony, but everything is about to take a turn for the worst when the Sinister Morph emerges with his army of Xenos coming straight for King T'Challa and the Wakandans and the last survivors. Wolverine and the surviving X-Men decide it'd be a good idea to take out the Sinister Morph before evacuating, but as soon as they launch their attack, the Sinister Morph reveals its abilities. It teleports away from Wolverine, then teleports into Armor's armor. I'm actually not sure if it's because inside Armor's armor it's hollow or because he also spliced Shadowcat's phasing abilities, but he takes out Armor, and when Captain Marvel unleashes her full power, eradicating the Xenomorph army, we see the Sinister Morph actually survives this by using Colossus's armor abilities. This Sinister Morph wipes the floor with the last remaining X-Men and then turns its sights to King T'Challa. King T'Challa is preparing to give the order for his fleet to escape while they try to take down this Sinister Xeno, when suddenly Miles appears, revealing he survived and he actually has a new friend. We then flash back to the battle where Tony, Carol, and Miles are separated. We know what happened to Carol, but now we see that Tony had actually been impaled by a xenomorph tail and was dying. Tony also seems to be aware of Miles' symbiote facehugger hybrid and its intelligence when he says to it, "You know what to do," and then it proceeds to implant Tony. So going back to the first issue, we know that Miles had been implanted with a facehugger, but the symbiote successfully removed it and bonded to it. So now in the final issue, we see what became of it when Miles shows up with his new friend, which is actually a venomized xenomorph. It proceeds to engage the Sinister Morph, but quickly loses the upper hand. After striking a killing blow, the Sinister Morph thinks it's won, but the symbiote Xeno envelops it and devours the Sinister Morph. This story ends with a recording from Tony giving the last Avengers a new mission to avenge him and everyone who died because of the androids. He wanted them to go out into the multiverse and end the Xenomorph threat. So I thought this was a phenomenal series, but I feel like this story was rushed. I could have swore when the series was announced, it was supposed to be a 5-issue miniseries. So I was pretty surprised when I saw it was actually just a 4-issue series. The engineers and android storyline felt especially rushed, and it's kind of ambiguous on what happened after the Wakandans blew the engineers out of the sky. In my head, I'm thinking they probably just experimented on the remains like they did with the androids. And then I actually mentioned this in my previous video, but Sinister needs to be dealt with. He literally became a universal threat by experimenting on the xenomorphs and mutants. That guy will always backstab everyone any chance he gets, and the X-Men keep hanging out with him. Why don't they ever learn? He just can't be trusted. He can't even trust himself because he decides to take out the rest of the implanted Sinisters. But the Sinister Morph itself is actually really interesting, and I'd honestly like to know more of its abilities. Like, what's the full extent of its abilities? I can only imagine if it had Wolverine's healing abilities, that thing could be terrifying and probably unstoppable, but I'm guessing it doesn't, but I'm still really interested to learn more about it. I actually think the androids and engineers would have been pretty impressed with how Sinister engineered the Xenomorph to himself, yeah, pun intended, and basically became a nigh unstoppable monster. This Sinister Morph literally toyed with Wolverine like he was nothing and easily knew how to counter a seemingly untouchable mutant ability when it effortlessly took down armor. If it wasn't for the Venom Morph, I think the Sinister Morph could have potentially took out the rest of the Marvel Universe. It was that much of a powerhouse. I'd actually love to see a 1v1 of the Sinister Morph and Apocalypse. I actually think it might be able to take him down. Not to mention, this is just one of the Sinister Morphs. We know each of the Sinisters were infected with their own chest burster, but the Sinister Morph Prime took them all out. But could you imagine if he had allowed them to live and there was an army of nigh unstoppable, hyper intelligent xenomorphs? They would have easily wiped out the rest of humanity and probably the engineers and androids too. Even though this story went by too fast, I loved it and I can't wait till they announce a follow-up series because it seems like it was teased in Tony's last words to the Avengers. So how do you feel about this finale? What do you think about the Sinister Morph and the Venom Morph? Do you think Apocalypse could still be alive on Earth? If so, what about Cap and Hulk? Do you think they're alive too?